My name is Elda Rowan, and I turned 72 the day my daughter told me to eat my own birthday cake off the floor. I've never liked noise, too much talk, too much drama. I'm the kind of woman who folds the grocery bags for reuse, keeps receipts in labeled envelopes, and listens more than I speak. I thought that kind of steadiness kept a family together. Turns out, it just made me the quietest target in the room. Maris insisted on hosting dinner at her house in Lake Oswego. Just close family, she'd said, which meant her husband, their son, and me. The table shimmered with polished silver and glass, all too perfect for how tense it felt. I placed the cake I'd bought, a simple vanilla from the market, on the counter. The woman at the bakery had written "Happy Birthday, Mom" in shaky blue letters. Maris looked at it and laughed. "You didn't even bother to bake." I said nothing. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and roast chicken. We sang. I blew out the candles. My grandson clapped, the way children do when they're told a moment matters. Then Maris slid the cake toward me, her smile sharp. "Go on," she said, lifting the plate. "Let's make a memory." She turned it over. The cake fell, frosting first. It splattered across the white tile, sweet and final. No one spoke. Cale coughed. The boy giggled, confused. I knelt with a paper towel, wiping quietly, the way I've done all my life, fixing messes I didn't make. My hands didn't shake. When I stood, I said only, "It's fine." Dinner continued in fragments: chicken, silence, clinking forks. I stayed through coffee, though it tasted like dust. That night, back in my small apartment overlooking the Willamette River, I rinsed the frosting from my shoes and set them by the door. My phone buzzed a message from Maris. "Don't come to my house again." I stared at it for a long time, then typed a single reply. "Removing your name from every account tomorrow." By midnight, the phone wouldn't stop lighting up calls, messages, each one a ripple in water I no longer intended to calm. I placed the phone face down, poured myself a cup of black tea, and watched the city lights tremble against the glass. Tomorrow would begin differently. I didn't sleep much that night. The words from my daughter's message still glowed in the dark behind my eyelids. I made tea before dawn, the way I always do when my mind won't quiet, and sat by the small table near the window. Outside, the river was just a shadow, moving slow and sure, everything I wasn't. On the shelf beside me sat a narrow notebook I used to keep meter readings and grocery lists. Out of habit, I flipped it open. Between the neat numbers and scribbles were other entries, dates, amounts, names. I hadn't realized how long I'd been keeping them. June 14th, co-signed for Maris's Civic. October 3rd, transferred $4,200 for down payment. May 8th, tuition for Eli's summer program. Promised to return by fall. Promises came and went, but the numbers stayed. I used to tell myself it was love that made me sign my name next to hers, that a mother's job was to make the road smoother. But I see now it wasn't love I was buying. It was peace. Every check I wrote bought another month without shouting, another visit that didn't end in guilt. There was the year her husband's business nearly made it, the time their power bill got mixed up, the furniture they said they'd replace when things got better. I learned to say, "Don't worry about it," even when I did. As the years blurred together, I began writing the amounts not to track money, but to prove to myself it had really happened, that the giving was real, that I hadn't imagined how one favor led to another, like stones sinking quietly underwater. When the first light came through the window, I closed the notebook and rested my hand on its cover. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, tired, yes, but clear. Love shouldn't come with a receipt, and yet, somehow, I'd been collecting them all my life. The next morning arrived gray and wet, the kind of Portland drizzle that never quite stops, just lingers like a thought you can't shake. I tucked my worn leather folder under my arm and walked to the bank 2 blocks from my apartment. The folder held everything: statements, old letters, and copies of forms I once signed without reading closely enough. My fingers left faint prints on the damp manila surface, Inside, the air smelled of coffee and paper. People waited in hushed lines, their umbrellas dripping quietly by the door. I approached the reception desk and gave my name. A woman in her late 50s appeared from a side office. She wore no perfume, just a simple navy jacket and a patient expression. "Mrs. Rowan," she asked. "I'm Kira Delane. Why don't we talk in here?" Her office was small but warm. I sat, unfolded my folder, and said, "I'd like to start removing my daughter's name from my accounts, wherever that's possible." Kira nodded once, without surprise or judgment. She asked a few questions, then began typing. Her voice was steady, matter of fact, the kind that makes you feel you're building something instead of breaking it. First, we revoked the joint credit card. Then she froze Maris's access to the trust, stopping the automatic withdrawals I'd almost forgotten about. Finally, she handed me a form to begin removing her as an authorized co-signer. "It'll take 30 days for full processing," Kira said, sliding me a pen. "But this starts the review." The pen felt heavier than it should have. When I signed, the sound of the nib scratching paper seemed louder than the rain outside. Kira stamped each document 3 small thuds in a row. With every one, I felt something unclench inside me. She looked up once the last page was sealed. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "It's not vengeance, Mrs. Rowan. It's alignment." I managed a faint smile. Alignment. The word felt like balance, like something leveled after years of tilt. When I stepped back outside, the drizzle hadn't stopped, but it didn't feel cold anymore. I pulled my coat tight and started walking home, the folder light in my hands, my name finally my own again. They came on a Sunday afternoon without calling first. I heard the car door slam before the knock sharp, hurried, almost theatrical. When I opened the door, Maris stood there with rain on her coat and fury in her eyes. Cale hovered behind her, jaw tight, phone in hand like it was a weapon. "You went to the bank," she said, her voice trembling with outrage. "Do you realize how this makes us look? You've embarrassed us." "Mother." I stepped aside. "Come in." Then, they sat across from me at the small dining table where I do my crossword puzzles. The city hummed faintly outside. A kettle clicked behind us. I folded my hands and waited. Cale spoke first. "We saw the notices. Do you know what it does to someone's credit when you pull out like that? We're family, for God's sake." "I do," I said. "That's why it took me so long." Maris leaned forward, voice rising. "You're punishing me because of one stupid joke, because of the cake I met her eyes. No, because I've spent 40 years paying for peace, and I finally ran out of currency." Cale laughed under his breath. "You loved it," he said. "Being the hero. Everyone knew you'd fix it eventually." I shook my head slowly. No, I loved quiet. Helping was the only way to get some. For a moment, the room went still. Maris looked down, maybe to find a softer version of herself that wasn't there. I stood. "This isn't a fight. It's a boundary. And I need you both to leave now." Maris opened her mouth, but Cale pulled her arm gently. They walked out without another word, the door closing too quickly behind them. The kettle whistled then, long and steady. I poured the water, hands steady. The steam rising like a breath, finally released. The first message came before sunrise on Monday. "You're overreacting. Mom, we can talk about this like adults." I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the counter. By breakfast, 3 more had arrived, one pleading, one scolding, one pretending nothing had happened. I didn't answer any of them. By Tuesday, the tone had softened. "I know you didn't mean to hurt us. You just need time." Each word felt like a line rehearsed before it was sent. I turned off notifications and went about my errands. The city was still wet from rain, sidewalks shining like mirrors. When I got home, the voicemail light blinked red. I didn't press play. On Wednesday, a picture arrived. Eli's smile filled the screen, his hair sticking up, his front teeth missing. Beneath it, Maris had typed, "He misses you." That one I couldn't ignore. My chest ached, but I forced myself not to reply. Love and guilt often wear the same clothes, and I was finally learning how to tell them apart. Thursday brought anger. "You'll regret this, Mom." Then another, colder. "Don't forget who took care of you when Dad died." I remembered every favor was a transaction, every comfort followed by a price. By Friday, the stream slowed. I checked my messages out of habit, then stopped. I made tea, watered the spider plant by the window, and for the first time in years, let silence fill the apartment. On Saturday morning, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a short email from Kira Delane. "All closures processed successfully. Joint accounts are inactive. You're in full control now." I sat back in my chair, exhaled, and let the quiet settle. Outside, the rain had finally ended. The city light caught on every surface, wet glass, clean pavement, the river glinting beyond the buildings. It felt like standing inside a pause, the kind that isn't empty but earned. It was close to midnight when the knocking started hard, hurried, the kind that comes from anger more than need. I was already in bed, reading by the dim lamp, but the sound made the page blur. I knew that knock before I even stood up. Maris's voice came through the wood, sharp and breathless. "Mom, open the door. We need to talk." I slipped my robe on and walked slowly down the hall. The building was quiet except for the soft hum of the elevator cables. I turned on the porch light, just enough to see her through the peephole rain on her face, eyes red, hair damp. There was no sign of Kale. I unlocked the first latch but left the chain in place. The door opened only a few inches, enough for her voice to spill through. "You think a chain stops family," she said, arms folded tight. "No," I answered. "It stops intrusion." She blinked, startled by the calm in my tone. "You've really lost it," she said, her voice trembling. "Do you know what you've done?" "They took the car. Mom. They're reviewing our accounts. Eli's school called about late fees." I leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't take anything from you. I just stopped giving." She shook her head, tears running with the rain. "You've changed. I've returned." I said, "This is who I was before I forgot to say no." For a moment she just stood there, breathing hard. Then her voice cracked. "You're not even going to help us one last time." "I already did," I said quietly, "by teaching you to stand on your own." The hallway light flickered. She wiped her face with her sleeve, then turned away. I watched her footsteps fade down the carpeted hall until the elevator doors closed. I shut the door gently. The chain clicked back into place with a sound that felt final, but not cruel. In the stillness that followed, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and breathed. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel like a room waiting for someone else to enter. It felt like home mine, and mine alone. 2 weeks later, the fallout arrived like weather, loud, sudden, and predictable. Maris's car was repossessed. A photo surfaced online that morning, her standing on the curb, arms crossed, the tow truck behind her. The caption read, "Some people love you until you stop paying their bills." She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. Friends commented with sympathy, others with curiosity. By afternoon, my name was spelled out in full under the thread. I didn't reply. I spent the morning trimming the rosemary bush on my balcony, letting the scent fill the air. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with alerts, messages, and thinly veiled lectures from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I muted them all. That evening, there was a soft knock. My neighbor, Mr. Pike, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of chamomile tea. He was in his 80s, a widower who still wore pressed shirts and carried himself like life owed him no apology. He set the extra cup on my counter and said, "Let them shout into the wind. Elda, you finally stopped being their storm shelter." I smiled small, tired, grateful. "It feels strange," I admitted. "Quiet can be loud when you're not used to it." He nodded. "That's the sound of peace getting its footing." After he left, I sat by the window, the tea cooling beside me, and scrolled through the last message Maris had sent. "You've ruined everything." My fingers hovered for a moment before I typed a single line. "Love doesn't require debt. I won't carry yours." Then I hit send and blocked her number. Outside, the city lights flickered against the river. I could hear faint laughter from the cafe below. The hum of late traffic, the pulse of normal life continuing without my permission or involvement. I leaned back in my chair, letting that small, ordinary noise wash through me until the silence inside finally matched the quiet outside. The days that followed were quiet, almost methodical. I filled them with paperwork forms, signatures, stamps, and steady pen strokes. The kind of labor that doesn't break your back but rebuilds your sense of self. At the kitchen table, I spread everything out: the new will, the medical directive, the insurance updates, the accounts now listed solely under my name. Each document carried a small kind of relief, like fitting pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for years. I labeled keys on a brass ring: home, mailbox, storage, and placed a note inside the drawer: "Everything you need is here. Elda Rowan." Passwords went into a small ledger, written in pencil so I could change them when I pleased. I organized folders by color: blue for legal, green for financial, yellow for personal letters. For the first time, the order wasn't about control, it was about peace. There was comfort in the small symmetry of things finally belonging only to me. On Friday, I drove out to the old lake cabin my husband built decades ago. The road curved through pines still damp from rain. The same stretch we used to take on weekends when we were younger and still believed time was endless. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I opened the windows and let the air move through every room. By evening, the lake mirrored the sky gray, melting into gold. I sat on the porch steps, hands folded around a mug of coffee, watching ripples catch the last light. Somewhere far off, a loon called, and the sound carried like a memory I no longer had to chase. I thought about how simple the act had been: signing, sealing, claiming. Yet in every signature there was a lifetime of reclaiming something deeper than money or property. It was the right to belong fully to myself, no longer shared, no longer borrowed. When the first stars appeared above the tree line, I closed the folder on my lap and smiled. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a water bill. I recognized the handwriting before I opened it. Maris's loops always leaned left, like she was trying to retreat from her own words. I sat by the kitchen window, let the paper warm in my hands, and began to read. "Mom," it began, "I've been seeing someone, a therapist. Kale's gone. It wasn't working, and I needed to admit that. I found a job at a small accounting office downtown. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I'm sorry for what I said, and for the things I made you carry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand now why you had to stop helping. You weren't leaving me. You were teaching me to stay on my own feet." The page ended there. No signature, no flourish. Just the faint scent of her perfume, the kind she always wore too much of when she wanted to feel brave. I read it twice, slowly, tracing the tremor in her handwriting like it was a scar beginning to fade. Then I folded it neatly and placed it beside the small framed commendation on my bookshelf, the one the fire department had given me decades ago. I'd helped evacuate a group of students during a small fire at the elementary school where I worked. The certificate had yellowed with time, but the words still stood out: "For calm under pressure and the prevention of greater loss." I looked between the two, one paper born of pride, the other of humility. and felt the distance between them narrow. Some fires burn houses, I whispered. Some burn pride. Outside, wind brushed through the balcony chimes. A light drizzle began again, soft and steady against the glass. I made tea and watched the steam rise, thinking how strange it was that real rescue rarely comes with sirens. Sometimes it arrives folded in an envelope, shaky but honest, reminding you that not all endings are ruin, some are repairs whispered back across the years. Spring returned to Portland with soft rain and the scent of lilac drifting through open windows. The city felt awake again, fresh paint on shop fronts, bicycles by the river, and light that lingered a little longer each evening. I set the table for 3, placing the good porcelain cups I'd kept wrapped since my husband's passing. Kira Delane arrived first, bringing a jar of apricot jam from a farmer's market. She looked rested, her calm as constant as ever. A few minutes later, Mr. Pike knocked gently and stepped in with a paper bag of lemon scones. The 3 of us sat by the window, steam curling above our tea. Conversation came easily, books we'd read, gardens that refused to bloom, the way small decisions can quietly reshape a life. After they left, the apartment was still but not empty. By the door hung the brass hook I'd bought at a second-hand shop the month before. I'd had it engraved home by consent. 2 keys dangled there, one for my apartment, one for the lake cabin. I liked the weight of them, the proof that what was mine stayed that way, because I chose it. A knock came just as the sky began to color toward evening. The mail carrier handed me a small envelope, the handwriting familiar. Inside, a single line in Maris's hand. "Thank you for the boundaries. No apology this time. No plea, just acknowledgement." I placed the letter on the counter beside the cooling teapot and watched the light fade across the river. The city shimmered, windows flickering on like fireflies, finding each other in the dusk. I thought of how many homes I'd kept, ones built from paper, from patience, from silence, and how this one, quiet and modest, was the first to truly feel like mine. I whispered into the warm stillness, "Love built me. Boundaries keep me standing." Then I turned off the lamp, leaving the room lit only by the slow rhythm of city light, steady as breath, steady as belonging.